During a sitting in the home of Camille Flammarion in November 1898 in France, sitters were stunned by the sight of a series of semi-transparent female half-figures that seemed to glide out of her body and down the length of the table. During climaxes of psychokinetic phenomena, Eusapia demonstrated numerous sexual behaviors. In fact, Hereward Carrington speculated there may be a definite connection between sex and psychical phenomena. Mina Crandon became stage magician Harry Houdini's arch-nemesis. Mina was the wife of Dr. Leroy Crandon. The couple hosted seances for other socialites like Eusapia. Mina exhibited sexual behavior during sittings and often performed nude. In 1924, Scientific America offered a prize for anyone that could display psychokinetic ability under controlled settings. Committee members included stage magician and arch-skeptic Harry Houdini. Houdini was confident all mediums were frauds and using stage magic to convince sitters of after-death communication, a concept he vehemently opposed. He exposed many mediums for fraud. During the second sitting for the committee, Houdini enclosed Mina in a box with a bell and asked her spirit guide Walter to ring it. Walter announced Houdini had tampered with the bell. When the box was opened, it was discovered that a piece of rubber had been wedged against the clapper so that it would not ring. Later, Walter announced Houdini had placed a ruler in the box to discredit Mina. When the box was opened, the ruler was found inside. Houdini's assistant confessed he had been ordered to place the ruler inside the box. The Society for Psychical Research continued testing Mina and caught her in fraudulent activity. Mina began to produce a mysterious substance called ectoplasm, especially from her vagina. When the substance was examined, it was found to be animal lung tissue. Martha Barreau was perhaps the most inconvenienced medium tested by the SPR. Before sitting, she was given full manual body cavity search and was sewn into a skin-tight bodysuit with a mesh hood. Ectoplasm pushed through the mesh and became solid, occasionally growing limbs. Most of the time, it would simply vanish during settings. In response to claims that she simply regurgitated cheesecloth after seances, she was given emetics to take so that she would vomit and investigators could examine the contents of her stomach. Nothing suspicious was ever discovered. She was exposed as a fraud in her later sittings when faces began to appear in the ectoplasm. Sitters recognized the faces as belonging in popular magazines in circulation at the time. Harry Price was a psychical researcher who never let the truth stand in the way of a good story. He was a sensationalist whose fame came from investigating one of the most haunted homes in England, Borley Rectory. Despite claims of fraud, he was one of the first investigators to use non-biased equipment to document paranormal activity. Harry Price met Stella Crenshaw in 1923 and was impressed by her supposed spiritual gifts. Over a 5-year period, Stella held seances at Price's National Laboratory of Psychical Research, where numerous physical phenomena are alleged to have occurred, including raps, flashes of light, messages, levitations of tables and other objects, the violent destruction of furniture, and on one occasion, an instance of precognition. During a sitting on May 3, 1923, a sprig of lilac dropped onto the seance table seemingly out of thin air. An item that allegedly appears out of thin air is called an apport. Jewelry, money, gemstones, and other items could appear before sitters. Some of Stella's seances weren't so pleasant. Sometimes the table moved violently. Once it jumped up and hit Price on the chin. Another time it rushed a corner and pinned a sitter, Colonel Hardwick, against the wall. These were usually accompanied by significant drops in temperature. During a seance, the temperature could drop as much as 20 degrees. A materialization medium is a person that claims to be able to produce phantom body parts and even full-bodied apparitions for sitters. Sitters believe the medium is tied in the spirit cabinet when she or he is actually parading around the room in cheesecloth imitating a deceased individual. One of the first materialization mediums exposed for fraud was Florence Cook. She was able to convince sitters, including Sir William Crookes, that she could materialize the supposed discarnate consciousness of Katie King. Her career ended December 9, 1873. A sitter named William Volkman violated seance etiquette and grabbed a so-called ghost. Cook's reputation never recovered. Helen Duncan was a Scottish medium who was one of the last persons to be charged under the Witchcraft Act. Even though she was exposed for fraud on numerous occasions, even the British military was convinced of the authenticity of her messages. In November 1941 in Portsmouth, England, she produced the ghost of Petty Officer Fryer, who announced the HMS Barham had been sunk.
Here in Portsmouth, so many people had lost loved ones, and for them it was an opportunity possibly to see them again.
So how would she actually have conducted the seance?
She would have gone into a trance very quickly, and then the voice of Albert, her spirit guide, usually he acted as the master of ceremonies and would speak to the sitters, and then spirits would begin coming out of the cabinet. Now, you have to remember that the lighting is very dim. There's a red light above the cabinet, and those that were at the back, in the back row, didn't get good view, but people that were close up said that they could recognize their loved ones, and that's how they communicated.
What happened on the night that she announced that the Barham had sunk?
As I understand it, what happened was a spirit came out of the cabinet.
Out of here, yeah.
Out of there. He gave his name as Sid, and he spoke to his mother, and I understand that he was wearing a hat with HMS Barham on it.
Over 60 years ago, there were maybe 35 people in this room when suddenly a spirit announces that this major British ship has been sunk, and no one could know that that had happened, and it was top secret.
It was until that moment.
During a seance in Edinburgh, Scotland in 1934, a sitter grabbed the supposed ghost and discovered it was nothing but a shirt. She was arrested, placed in jail for a month, and forced to pay £10. However, not all sitters believe all of her materializations were props.
And it was a red light, which when you get accustomed to it, you can see the features and expressions of somebody sitting 5-6 feet across the room from you. At certain stages, curtains were drawn across, which of course does tend to give people the idea there's a lot of hanky-panky going on. There was a quite distinguishable smell with ectoplasm. Quite distinguishable.
Like what?
It's rather like bodily semen or that sort of smell. Not unpleasant, but not one that one would expect to have around the room, but very strong. And then this ectoplasm, as I say, snaked across the floor and came up really between us. There appeared the face of a man, short hair, and suddenly one of these blobs, as it were, being almost thrown on, formed a fairly large moustache. I said, "Oh, moustache!" It was a silly thing, but you know.
You knew who it was?
I knew, yes, from immediately recognisable, as I would recognise you. He was very cross with me for only commenting about the moustache, and chided me as if, you know, as if that's all you've got to say. All very military.
Did he look dead?
Well, I suppose if you thought of it, yes. But well, his face was animated and speaking, and after 2 or 3 little interchanges, nothing of great import, I'm bound to say, he disintegrated, collapsed at our feet, withdrawn into the medium, right across the floor.
It does sound in many ways quite implausible, doesn't it?
It does indeed, I quite agree. I'd sympathise with anybody who disbelieved me and think they had a stronger case in a way. It's only when you've had personal experience you have to reconsider and realise that such odd things can happen. I was 100% satisfied then, and I'm 100% satisfied now.
Even if Helen had somehow obtained information about the sinking of HMS Barham prior to the seance, it is clear she knew about the sinking of the HMS Hood before the British military.
It's another seance earlier in 1941. Helen Duncan announces the loss of another ship, this time HMS Hood. This surely was the moment when, as far as the security services were concerned, Helen became a marked woman. The head of British military intelligence in Scotland, Brigadier Firebrace, was at the séance. And we're on our way to meet the woman who worked with him for 20 years. This is a magazine from January 1959. It's an interview with a Brigadier Firebrace,
yes,
where he says, during the war, I was head of intelligence in Scotland,
right,
and I